Welcome back to Question Time at Alhambra Investments. What a better way to start your week than right here. And Steve Brennan has sifted through all your questions and picked out one just for today. Steve?
The question today is, did COVID cause a structural change to the economy? Really easy question there, Joe. What do you say?
Yeah, that's really simple, right? It doesn't really doesn't require much thought. Well, actually, in some ways, it doesn't. Did COVID change the economy? Yeah, it did. Okay. So we're done. I'll see you guys tomorrow. No, it's not enough. I wrote a little bit about this weekend in my questions commentary this weekend. I like doing these things occasionally where you just ask questions and don't provide any answers. So it helps me to think about things. Anyway, yeah, listen, I think that, look, the obvious way that COVID changed things was it changed the way fiscal policy has been applied to the economy, right? I mean, for decades, really, since the 90s, the main impetus for change in the economy has come from monetary policy. Yeah, there's been some changes in tax policy along the way, but quite frankly, the bigger changes were on the monetary side, whether it had to do with QE or QT now, whatever you want to call those things, they are monetary. And that was the main policy tool coming out of DC. We can have a long discussion about how effective it was, but the bottom line is that's what we got. Even if you go back to 2008 and you look at the stimulus package that came out of in 2009, 2010 under Obama, it was a fraction of what we did for COVID. So yeah, I mean, look, ramping up fiscal spending in a lot of different ways, and it was really, in some ways, the initial response to COVID from the fiscal side was the traditional, or I don't know, traditional is not the right word, the much ballyhooed helicopter drop. We just gave people money, and because the Fed was doing QE at the time, I suppose you could say it was essentially money printing. But regardless of what it was fiscal. It was much bigger than anything we've done in the past. We're talking about fiscal policy that really, we're talking on the scale of World War II. So yes, that had an impact. And I think it had an impact in a lot of different ways on household balance sheets. We know that people, for the first, 9 months a year, and maybe even a little bit more than that of COVID, people sat home. They didn't do anything. And because they didn't do anything, they saved a lot of money because they were still getting paid, or they were collecting government benefits, however you want to, whatever the case may be. But bottom line is they built up a lot of savings. A lot of that money that has gone into checking accounts and money market funds, it's still there. But I think most of it, if you look at the average checking account balance now, it's back down to about what it was before COVID, maybe a little bit higher. I guess that could be inflation, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, the point is that fiscal policy is still running a large deficit in the economy. You're looking at 5, 6, 7% of GDP. Those are big numbers, and they're going to have an impact on the economy. Now, what we're getting right now from the Biden administration, what we've been getting for the Biden administration is the front end of fiscal spending. What I mean by that is you can see the big ramp up, for instance, in manufacturing facilities and the construction numbers. That is economic growth, if you want to think about it that way. The question is, will those things be effective once they're built? Will we be able to man them? Will we be able to operate these companies and these manufacturing facilities in an efficient way? That's where the rubber meets the road. But at least for now, we're getting growth out of it, quote unquote, because we're getting the activity of actually building these things. But I focus a little bit on something different in the weekend. I like to think of, when I do these questions, I like to think about things that other people aren't thinking about. And I think maybe COVID had a psychological impact on people that is having an impact on the economy. One of the most notable features of the post-COVID economy is the rise in new business formation. And more specifically, what's known as high propensity business formation. High propensity means that they have a high likelihood of hiring people. It's not just some guy with an independent contractor who's acting as an independent contractor and gets paid that way, who set up an S corp or whatever in order to collect his pay. That's not what this is. It seems to be people starting companies. And I wonder if and that's a risky business, obviously. Starting a company, I've done it, believe me, and there's a lot of risk involved. And so I wonder, though, if COVID didn't convince people that, you know what, look, compared to COVID, compared to dying, starting a business isn't that scary. And I wonder if maybe it hasn't affected people's the psychology here, where people are taking more risk. If that's true, I think it's a big positive for the economy. We need people to take risk, and it's interesting. If you go back to Ben Bernanke and talking about QE, the original editorial that he wrote for the New York Times talking about why we were doing QE and what its purpose was, and he intimated that, well, no, he said directly that the purpose was to get people to take risk. But, I don't think that it was the right type of risk. Lowering interest rates to zero and then engaging in QE encouraged people to speculate in financial markets and so forth. But that's not the kind of risk taking we need to make the economy grow. We need risk taking like starting businesses and being entrepreneurial. That's what risk taking, that's the type of risk taking we need in the economy in order to grow, to get more efficient, to increase productivity, to do all these things that we need to do in order to grow. So I wonder if COVID hasn't had an impact on things. A lot of people have called this period, gone back to looking at the 1920s and said, is this going to be the roaring 20s? I don't know, but I will tell you that, that was a feature of that time too, risk taking. Now, maybe it took different forms, but the point is that there was a lot of things going on back then. It was about risk taking. So maybe we're going to get that too. Look, in order for us to get economic growth to a boom level, to get really, a high level of real growth, you're going to have this increase in productivity, because you're not going to get it from immigration. And so how do you get that productivity? Well, you get it by people experimenting and going out and do things and starting companies and doing the things that are risk-taking in the real economy. So I don't know. We'll see. Steve, I don't know if this has changed things permanently. If that's what the change is, I hope it's permanent. I think it would be very good for our economy and good for the country. So we'll see. I want to see that continue. It's lasted already. That new business formation continues. It has lasted already longer than, because I remember a lot of people at the beginning when this first happened, it ramped up and everyone's like, oh, well, that'll fade. And it hasn't. And I think that's important. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, Steve.
Well, the more questions, the better. So make sure you get yours in, put them in the comment section down below.